It's Friday, and I'm back with the next in our Fanzine Friday series. Today we're taking a look at Dungeons Chronicle number 5. Please stick around. I'm AZ Mountaineer, and this is our channel, Old School Rules, where we celebrate the community of old school gamers and grognards who like classic RPGs, miniatures, magazines, and everything that goes with it. Each week on the Fanzine Friday series, we take a fanzine from my collection off the shelf for a closer look, and today it's Dungeons Chronicle number 5 from 1977. Hope you enjoy the video. So we're continuing this week with our look at a fanzine called Dungeons Chronicle. This is Dungeons Chronicle number 5. It's from 1977. Stanley Wood is the principal editor. I mentioned before that this is put together by a local gaming group. They call themselves now, this is the official fanzine of the Lesser Mid-Missouri Sword and Sorcery Society. That's Colombia, Missouri. They put their fanzine out on 8.5 by 11 paper. My copies are hole punched. They look like they're photocopied, although they talked last time and again this time that they switched from Xeroxing to using stencils and printing. They thought it would be cheaper, but it looks like based on the size of their circulation, it actually doesn't save them any money. But they also talk about a little bit in their first page about their circulation, their cost, how you go about submissions. They have phone numbers for different people in their group. They mentioned Paul Young, Kevin McCauley, who does a lot of the art, Joe Vaughn, Fritz Fleming, Russell Somers, and then in addition to Stanley Wood, who's an editor, they list Jim Givens and Paul Young as editors for this particular issue. Here's the art by Kevin McCauley, and you see at the bottom right corner FBN. They call themselves the Fly-By-Night Press Publications. I really like the way these guys, they're very professional in some respects about everything they're trying to do here. This art, so there's an article, we'll talk about table contents in a second, that focuses on Angkor Wat over in today where we have Cambodia, parts of Thailand, and so this is inspired by, I think, the art from that area. I'm going to guess that maybe Kevin had been there on a vacation or something, because he's got great drawings and maps and things of the area, so that or else he did a lot of research. Here's our table of contents. It's a pretty full one today. Monk combat is an alternate way of doing combat for monks. What they point out is that monks at the highest level do just ridiculous amounts of damage. And so their solution is an interesting one. They sort of call it giving monks spells, but they really just give them martial arts techniques in place, but I guess they sort of use it like spells. They have the book reviews. They have several. They look at The Broken Sword by Paul Anderson, Earthsea Trilogy by Ursula Le Guin, The Dragon and the George by Gordon R. Dixon, Gore novels by John Norman, Scorpio by Alan Burt Akers, and the Elric series by Michael Moorcock. Mostly positive reviews of those for various different reasons. Monks and Monasteries is a discussion about the actual monasteries for the monks, how big they would be. They have a particular idea about how to set those up in your campaign world. Alternate combat system based on hit points. A fist fighting matrix. Also for monks, or well, anybody, I think, unarmed combat. An editorial about the use of monsters and the addition of more monsters to the campaign. Some cleric information here, the holy favor concept, as well as some new clerical spells. Altering damage, and it's a new table they want to use. We'll talk a little bit about that for damage. Another game review now for the new TSR release of Lankhmar, Fritz Lieber's World for Grey Mouser. And they like it pretty well. Thought for the type of game that it is, it was pretty well done. Then they have something called Juggery Excerpts, which are basically poems and limericks and other silly stuff that they put in there. And then this big section on Angkor Wat. They talk a lot about Angkor Wat, like in the real world, what it is, how it came to be. They talk about the various temples they had and so forth. And then they talk about how you could utilize that as a potential setting for a campaign. And how to utilize that, some ideas and suggestions. Then there's, if you like new magical items, they've really got you covered here. New magical books. They've got a table with 100, so you roll a die 100 to randomly generate a magical book. And they've got 100 different books. We'll talk about those. Everything from kind of interesting, typical D&D stuff to some pretty silly ideas. And then we have some relics they want to add to the game. These are a little bit more sci-fi than fantasy. But, early on there was a little bit of, I think, more blending than there probably is nowadays with that. A new discussion about encumbrance, and then it's actually not on here, the Klutzo Kobold comic. For whatever reason, the table of contents in the fanzine says that is there at the back, as it has been in every issue, but my copy of this is missing the comic, so I'm not able to share that with you this time around. Okay, big table of contents, lots of stuff to talk about. Here's our contributors, the same folks we normally have here who've been contributing through the fanzines to date. The first thing we're going to look at is monk combat. And as I said, their stated concept is to make this more like, they say, being a spell system than a combat system, but I probably think it's a misnomer, or at least I would revise their concept that way. They give you a number of attacks per round, just like you normally had, where you get more per round as you go up in progression. And then they essentially give you points, and they have 3 different groups, like spell levels, group 1, group 2, group 3. But those groups are types of martial arts moves. Punches, elbow strikes, kicks, as well as some defensive moves that you can use. And so you can pick and utilize, based on the number points you have, you can utilize different types of martial arts moves, and they've got a very long list of exactly what it does. Anything from just maybe 4 points of damage plus a chance of knocking you out, knocking you down, knocking you back, breaking a shield, cracking some damage, doing damage to particular parts of the body, etc. So, again, interesting, very typical thing. You see people trying to come up with alternate rules to flesh out some of these character classes. Then we have these book reviews, as I mentioned. In general, these are books you've probably heard of. I've read most of them. I think they're pretty good books. The Broken Sword by Paul Anderson I thought was particularly good. Earthsea Trilogy I read when I was a kid, and I thought that was a really good one as well. Wasn't as familiar with the Gore series or the Scorpio novels, and of course everybody's probably heard of, even if you haven't read the Michael Moorcock Elric series, which is very highly regarded, and they thought like the best sort of Dungeons and Dragons flavor type of books from their book review. All right, then we come to monks and monasteries, and essentially in their campaign world, you remember as you go up in monks, there's fewer and fewer of them, and so they've got like one central monastery that's the most important one for the highest level of mastery, and then they've got, I think there's 9, they say, different grand masters, and so there'll be 9 monasteries for each of the grand masters placed around your campaign world, and they say, utilize this, create some intrigue or interconnections between them. They've also got ideas in this series about how big they would be. The bigger the Grand Master, the bigger the sort of city environs that are around it. The more monks that would be present, the more treasure that would be around there. The combat based on hit points, the concept is, and they say it, I think it makes sense, if you're at full health, you're going to fight better than if you've only got 2 hit points left. That's their theory, because their idea is, in addition to the kind of some of the things Gygax said, at some point you surely are wearing down, you're fatigued, you're maybe taking damage, cuts, bruises, breaks here and there. And so what they do is basically have a chart where how many hit points do you have left, and then an armor class. And their idea is the more, whether it's because magic users move more slowly, so their combat would move up more slowly, as well as whether you're full strength or partial strength, and then it would adjust that way. I think it's an interesting idea. The other thing here at the bottom is additions to the fist fighting matrix, and so this is basically a way to do unarmed combat, non-monks unarmed combat, although they give bonuses. So monks get the biggest bonus, fighters, clerics, mages get smaller bonuses on their attacks, on their defenses. They roll a D100 chart versus the opponent's constitution, and they look at the exceptional strength, if you have exceptional strength, and give you a chance to knock somebody out, give you bonuses for like wearing steel gauntlets would help you. Having a helmet would, lower the chance you'd knock someone out. So that's their idea here. Now they have an editorial titled Too Many Monsters. And unlike me, Stanley Wood thinks there are too many monsters just in the monster manual itself. We all know my thing, you can never have too many monsters. I think that's true. I think his biggest criticism is if you just have some core monsters and you use them well, they have good flavor within your campaign, you don't need an extra book full of 300 new random monsters. I think I take his point that making your monsters more interesting and not just, different outfit, but just basically walking hit points is a good point. And I appreciate what he was trying to do. It made me thinking about your monsters more than just being a random different type of encounter, really thinking about what's in your world, why they're there, giving them some sort of flavor. So your characters, maybe they hate orcs, right, because of things orcs have done in the past, and that they should feel differently about orcs than, say, goblins or kobolds. I think there's, I'll take his point on that. I think that's an interesting opinion. Okay, then we've got a really large articles, really back to back or blended together for clerics. He talks here about the thing that they've been doing where they focus on religion in their campaign, prayers and so forth, and how he ties that back into this concept of favor, the need to, in his campaign, do some type of sacrifice, whether it's a donation of money, as opposed to live creatures for your good-based deities, coming to the temple for those kind of things, etc., and how that gives you more favor, and as a consequence, you get better spells, better spell results, or prayer results as a consequence of your devotion. There's generally a lot of articles about clerics and saying, again, not making them just sort of walking healing factories, trying to infuse into there some role-playing where the player is conscious to make his character or her character interacting with and doing things that you would as a cleric for your deity. Now they have some new spells. I'll mention some of those for you. First level, Lust. It will raise your charisma and help you be more persuasive in your campaign. If you're really into the sort of love, lust kind of thing that they've mentioned before, it gives you an advantage in that. Create Wine and Ale does exactly what you'd think. Luck Charm gives a +1 on saving throws to your party for a short period of time. And Identify Power allows you to understand the level and ability scores of another person that you're, the focus of your spell. Second level, Create Weapon allows you to create one particular weapon or armor out of sort of, ethereal, out of the air, and it lasts for a day. You can do up to one per day. Charm of Amazing Agility will raise your dexterity score for a brief period of time. Powerful Luck Charm gives you +2 on your saving throws for your party. Berserking, cast on a different person, have to have a relatively lower IQ, gives you +2 to hit, +2 on damage, but lowers your armor class by 1 until everyone is killed. 20% chance in his spell that you turn on whoever's left, which would be your allies at that point. Third level spells, Enlightenment, lets you know, basically identify, lets you understand what a magic item is. Raise, that's not a PG spell. They've got some sex-based spell in here. We'll skip that one. Endurance is allows you to survive weather temperatures for a day, no matter how severe they are, as long as they're non-magical. Divine Awe surrounds you with a glowing light, gives you an 18 charisma, so you can be super persuasive with people. Fourth level spell, Despair, will cause 1 die 20, fourth level or under folks to have a lower morale. That seems fairly balanced. Summon serpents, 1 to 100 snakes, constricting snakes, or 3 to 30 poisonous snakes, or 1 giant naga. And they serve the cleric for 12 turns. The Holy Jug summons a jug that you can use. It's a gigantic jug that you can drop over top of a humanoid creature. They get a saving throw to try avoid being stuck inside of the jug. Divine Encouragement gives 1d20 people plus on their morale. Web spell, like the magic user, I'm not sure why we're giving them that. And Hellspawn creates mutated forms of life, humans, mammals, insects, or fishoid, giant insects, giant fish, that will basically follow the general directions of the cleric. 5th level, Word of Halt, forces everyone who's not a ally to just basically stand still for 1d4 turns. The Hammer of Rage creates a massive war hammer that hits as a 10th level fighter and does 6 dice of damage. If the cleric is above 10th level, you get an extra die of damage for every level over 10th. 7th level spells, Tidal Wave. Have to be near water, creates a giant tidal wave that will smash into land and potentially drown characters. That's a fairly specific situation type spell. The Great Spear creates a 20-foot long spear that hits as a 12th level fighter, does 8 dice of damage, and for every level above 9th level, an additional die of damage. And finally, Convoke Demon, and within 1d12 turns, it will take 1d12 turns to cast the spell. You can't be interrupted, and then you're able to summon a demon. And the demon will be 1/2 the hit dice of the cleric who's doing the casting. And it's just sort of a generic demon. It's not a demon from a particular book. Should be aligned somewhat with the clerics. I'm not sure what kind of demon good aligned clerics are summoning, but there you go. All right, new chart for altering damage done in melee. The higher, so we got the number needed to hit across the top, and then what you rolled down the left, and it has the effect is basically if you just, I don't think it's supposed to change when you hit, I don't think, but if you just barely hit, you're going to only do half damage. If you exceed by a few points, 2, 3, 4 points, then you're going to get normal damage. And then if you really are several points over, so like here, it looks like you're about 8 points over, you double your damage, or you triple your damage, all the way up to quintuple your damage. So it's a different way of doing critical hits, right? It's from barely hit, normal hit, and then really, really good blow. It's an interesting idea. All right, so now we get into this section on Angkor Wat. And the main thing he does is, for like 4 or 5 pages, is he talks about it. And there's some great art. He's got, if you haven't been there, highly recommend it if you ever have a chance to take this trip. Angkor, the empire, there are all these different temples, and they're not right next to each other, so you sort of travel around between them. He's got a map of a few of the biggest ones here. And then he's got a drawing at the bottom to show you the entrance to one of these temples. Fantastic place. They've been in some movies. I think he's right. It's a fantastic sort of setting for some type of an adventure. It just sort of feels like Dungeons and Dragons when you're there. And after talking a lot about the history of Angkor and the history of some of these different temples and what they look like, etc., then he also talks about how you can utilize the ideas in your Dungeons and Dragons campaign. So I think, again, great setting. Go to your local library, get check outs for free. I'm sure you can find books on this to look at and enjoy. The next thing we have is this chart of 100 new manuals and books. It's definitely worth the read. Some of these things are really creative and good, and like I said, sort of feel like they belong in Dungeons and Dragons. Some of them are just gonzo. They've got sci-fi stuff in here. They draw on Star Trek and other movies like that. They've got some sort of raunchy stuff in here. These guys like to go a little bit into the adult humor at times with their books. But it's, I think, a great idea on your own home campaign to come up with all kinds of different books, whether they provide magical benefits or are just interesting, give you clues, give you plot threads. A library can be a really fantastic place to send your characters. And so here's a plot idea, is to have a library well protected so people can't come in and steal stuff, and create this situation where your characters basically are able to go in and get a random book. And then that book, like I said, gives them a plot hook, whether it's a magic item to go after, a legend, location of a dungeon, something. And every time they sort of come back to this library, maybe that's where the sort of wise wizard of your campaign is, and he's like, "Oh, I've got this new book for you," and that's how you kick off your next adventure. Anyway, just an idea. The other thing they have is a list of relics. These are sci-fi based, well, compared to D&D, flamethrowers, holographic projectors, anti-gravity, gravity bomb, time controller, communicator, life support belt, neural blocking ray, phaser, and shuttlecraft. So, if you want to add some, they call them relics. In some people's D&D game is sort of like Terry Brooks. It's based on the idea that our society went forward into more sci-fi technology era, and then sort of collapsed back into a sort of medieval magic-based era. So just like the S3 adventure, right, on the Barrier Peaks. So anyway, that's an idea if you like that for your campaign. And finally, there's a short article on encumbrance, which this guy's written. He said basically as a commentary on what his DMs are doing in the campaign, mostly complaints about the idea that people can carry thousands and thousands of gold pieces out of a dungeon at one time, and there's no penalty, there's no worry about how in the world are you carrying all that gold. And he'd like to see more realism. Similar thing about literally people come in, they don't have the sacks or the chests or the wagons to use to carry it out, and that they seem to ignore that. And he thinks, look, there's an encumbrance, it's real, that should be part of the adventure, is you can only take what you can take kind of thing. And unless you're going to have hirelings or others who come with you and who you have to protect in the dungeon, purely there to sort of as porters, right, to carry your stuff for you. So interesting concepts, and interesting article. I think the balance between realism and playability is always a tension in the game. That's it for Dungeons Chronicle number 5. There's one more in this series to go. I'm going to be on vacation for a couple of weeks, so I will see you guys probably next month. I hope everyone's having a great weekend. Hope you're enjoying the videos. Take some time while I'm gone to go back and look at any you may have missed. And until next time, my friends, keep rolling.